Today, we're going to sew up the latest pattern by Bagstock Designs called the Sunshine Crossbody Pouch. So let's grab our supplies and let's get started. This new pattern I've downloaded onto my iPad. I decided that would be an easier way to do this as opposed to printing out all the photos or all the pages rather. And as you go through, you can see the materials you need, the interfacing tips. When you jump down to the bottom here, this is where all the pieces are. Here's a tip that I'm going to give is this 2-inch square, save it, cut it, use it, because you need it for the zipper tab. And then this is awesome. She added pouch cutting labels. So you can cut these out and add them to each piece. And when you've used them all up, you know you're done. My bag is not going to have foam. I don't use foam in most of the things I sew. To me, they feel like a pillow. I don't dig them. So I'll be using Thermolam by Pellon. So that's how I give my bag structure. So the pieces are all interfaced with SF101, and then on top of that, when I'm done, after I complete the entire exterior portion, I will fuse the Thermolam to the outside of the bag. So I just wanted to go over a couple things on the pattern, and I think it's time for us to get started. I have everything cut out, so let's get this bag made. So we're going to be sewing this bag up based upon the instructions in the order in which things are told to be done in the instructions. When I typically do a bag, I actually prefer, pardon the chair noise, I actually prefer to take care of all my lining stuff first and make my wristlet strap first, just so I'm done with the not so fun things. And when I'm really close to the end of the bag, at least assembling like the exterior, I feel that much closer to being done with the bag. So that's just my own fun game I like to play with my head. And another thing I like to do, I like tape. A lot of you might already know this, but I like double-sided tape. I typically will use the 5mm tape that I get from Tandy Leather. It's this one, the brown one, is repositionable. The white one is permanent. So, I mean, it's sticky. On my industrial, I don't have a lot of problems sewing with it. If I start to get a skip stitch, it's because my needle is a little sticky. I'll take alcohol, I wipe it off, and I'm good to go. So in this particular bag, what I'm using, I grabbed this. It's called Sookwang Tape. It is Scor Tape. A lot of people use it for scrapbooking. And a lot of us have discovered that it's pretty terrific for bag making. You can sew through it, it doesn't really mess with your needle too much, and domestic machines don't hate it. So I would get the thinnest stuff you can get, which is the 1/8 of an inch. There will be links on this video for you to find it at Amazon. And so getting started here, the first thing you need to do is locate the center of these pieces. And you can do that just simply by folding it in half, finding a little mark. So I just made a mark here, or you can take the pattern piece, and on the pattern piece, you can make the same mark on the pattern piece and put a little hole punch there. So when you cut this out, you'll be able to find it. That's another option for you to do it this way. So let's get these attached to our exterior crossbody back center, and let's get this sewn up. So let's tear off the tape on each of these and put them on the back side. We also, if I didn't mention it before, we need to find the center on this piece as well. And you can either mark it with a pin, or you can, this is what I like to do. I like to take and nick it. I'll even it across. And again, I'm just going to nick it. Now you can use your scissors or your rotary cutter. You don't have to take a big nick because you're sewing it at 3/8 of an inch. So there's my two spots. So I have a little nick and a little nick. Now this is my right wing, and I'll explain this too. I don't put tape all the way to the top because I'm going to trim this. Same goes here. I don't, when this is put together, this side and this side are going to meet the front sides, and the less bulk they have at the seams, the better it'll be. And when you have to put a zipper at the top, again, you're going to be folding it over, and the less bulk you have, the better. So that's why I trim. So, and that's why I don't put tape in those two spots. So let's peel that tape off and let's get this located on here. And I'll explain a little bit why. And I'm just gonna, since I didn't nick this one, I'm just gonna put this pin here as a little marker. All right, there we go. The reason she has you do this is because there was some questions on the last pattern why there is overhang and why there isn't. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's sewn at 3/8 of an inch. So you can mark it this way, or you can do this as well. This is your other option, which is one I will use when I do this. So I also have a tape measure on here for another reason, not just because I like to line things up, but if I don't have my ruler, then I can do it this way. So from this edge over, because I'm sewing at 3/8 of an inch, I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3. There's my 3/8 mark. Again, same with this, 1, 2, 3. That's where the line is going to start. That's where I'm going to start stitching. So what I can do, I can put this on and I can keep moving it until those two spots hit. Once those two spots hit, you can see that, that's where I start stitching. And that's how I know I'm not going to have any overhang. Because you can see at the bottom, you have a little tiny bit here. Well, of course you do, because if you see at the top, you have a little tiny bit here. If you have a little at the top, you got to have a little at the bottom. So you can mark it or you can do that. I'm a huge fan of the whole figuring it out this way, just because that's just who I am. But that's how I sew. So I'm going to mark this one. 1, 2, 3. There we go. And same goes for this one. And I have rulers everywhere in my studio. 1, 2, 3. For that reason, because I'm a weirdo that way. So I'm going to peel this off. I'm going to throw it away because my puppy likes to eat it. Yeah, he does. He's not allowed to. I'm constantly pulling that stuff out of his mouth because he's a naughty guy. Naughty, naughty dog. All right. A lot of you know I give you little stories about my puppies and my family as I sew. Because I'm down here, I'm alone. I mean, it seems like I'm with you, but I'm technically by myself. All right, so here we go. I've shortened my stitch length to 3, and I have my Teflon foot on because after I trim this, I'm going to top stitch on that cork, and I need to be able to glide nicely on the cork. Now, my machine here does not have the 3/8 inch mark, but my tape does. I'm going to need a new piece of tape too soon, but I'm going to follow this as my guide. And I already have kind of an idea where 3/8 is just because I'm pretty good at measuring things. And I'm going to do that, and now I'm going to straight stitch down. So we're just going to straight stitch this side. Back stitch at the end, pull it off, cut it. If I was making multiples, well, then I wouldn't have cut it. I just would have grabbed another one and kept sewing. All right. So I'm just going to start this one, take a couple stitches, back stitch, and hoobie-doobie, right on. All right. I like to try and keep my threads trimmed. I'm not always great at it, but I try my best. All right, so we did that. And now I'm going to take my rotary cutter, and this is why this mat is on here. I'm going to trim this. I'm not going to cut that stitch line. I'm just going to trim this. As you can see, I did a nice little quick trim. I just want to go low enough down. I know I'm going to stitch the zipper in at about 3/8 of an inch, and because of that, now I'm going to save these two, by the way. Because of that, I know I need to go up at least, you know, to make this a little easier on myself that far. It's about a 1/2 inch on an angle there, or I'm sorry, 3/4 of an inch on an angle. Now I like to top stitch on the cork or my vinyl, so I will fold it back from there and top stitch it that way. Now if you really want it tight, which I really do prefer having it tight like that, I like it taut. I like it folded back and taut. And to me, precision is kind of the key when you're sewing these bags. So again, precision. I'm using my repositionable. Why, you might ask? Well, because it's within hand's reach. It's within arm's reach. It's right here. I failed to grab my permanent, which is what I typically sew with. So that's what we're using. Now I did it, you can do it on this side, you can do it on this side, doesn't matter. You're just gonna fold it over. Make a nice crease right there. And now, if you're like, oh no, I have to go get a kid off the bus. If you're using that permanent, it's gonna stay nice and folded and you don't have to worry. See, I got you. All right, so now I'm gonna sew this with a nice top stitch. I'm gonna lengthen my stitch length, and then I'm sewing right next to it, and this foot gives me 1/8 of an inch seam allowance for my top stitch. And I always just keep checking and folding it down and easing it down. All right. Now I'm going to go up this side, and then our back piece will be done. And if we need to trim, which I'll grab the ruler and we'll do a quick double check. I always keep rulers next to me while I'm sewing. I have some favorites. I love my Omni Grid, and I love them in all sizes. Because sometimes I sew little bags and sometimes I sew big bags. All right. So, looking at this, I have a little extra at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is grab my ruler. I'm going to lay it on here straight across. And from this side and this side are great. And this side has a scant 1/8 of an inch. And that's it. That is all. So I'll nick that off. You didn't have to. You're going to catch it when you sew, so it's not too big a deal. And the upper half, it's not really off at all. Just how it worked out. So now this side is done, and I'm going to set it over to the side, and we're going to get ready to do the front with the added zipper pocket in front. Woohoo! Okay, so we're going to prep these pieces for our zippered pocket. We need to have a couple of things for this. We need our exterior front center bottom panel, which I have. I'm going to throw that little over there, a little tab. We need our exterior front center top panel. And just as a heads up, I took and put tape, a strip of my tape, it doesn't matter if it's the Scor Tape or if it's the temporary, like the repositionable. I just put it across the backs of each of these, and when I cut it, I can stick and keep it on there. And then all of my pieces go into a little tote. I keep them in a little shoebox tote, so I have everything together, and I don't go searching my studio because I have done that. Yeah, good times. So to do this, you need these two pieces, you need your zipper, and then you also need your exterior front zipper pocket panel. Again, I'm putting all my pieces to the side. So we have all of our pieces ready, and what I've done is you mark the center of your zip. Easy to do that. Fold it over in half, slap a couple pins in there, or mark it with a blue pen. I wouldn't nick this. I don't like nicking my zippers, so that's something I wouldn't do. Or you can lay it on a grid, find the center, which is 4 inches, and mark it that way. You want to do that so, and yes, this is longer than you need, but we're going to trim it, and that's okay. That way we get a little more precision when we do this. So there's that. And then what we also want to do is mark the centers of these. So on this one, you want to fold it again like we did before. You can mark it with a pen, or you can do a little nick. I did a little nick on this one. We're going to take this one and we're going to fold this one in half. And I don't need to mark the top. If you want, you can, but it's irrelevant. And I folded it in half, and now I am going to grab my scissors and put a little nick right there. And I like my nicks to be kind of pointy. I can see them better. So this one, I did a little nick right there. So now what I'm going to do, we need to put tape on here. Some people don't use tape. I'm a tape fan. We already discussed my weirdness with tape. So what you want to do is put tape on this bottom piece first, right here, the exterior front bottom, this piece. We're going to put a piece of tape across right here. Don't overthink this. Don't panic. It's a zipper. And if you're not using metal, then you really can't hurt your machine if for some reason you hit the zipper teeth. And now we're going to peel this off, and we're going to take our zip. Now remember, when you put this on, you want to put it so when the zipper is closed, the head is on the left. And we know that our nick is right here, so I'm going to use this, this kind of brighter yellow line here so you can see that. Here's my blue spot. I'm going to put it right there. So there we go. And now I'm going to even it across. Now it's a little bubbly here. That's because that's where the zip's at. So I'm just going to pull it out of the way. If you're afraid that you might pull this zipper head off, take it to your machine and stitch across each of these zipper teeth at both ends, and you'll be good. You'll be solid. So now what I want to do is take this one and set it to the side because we don't need it yet. And we're going to grab this because we do need this. And you can mark the center, but you don't have to because it's roughly the same length as your zip. So don't panic. If you really need to, go ahead. So we'll fold it here. We'll do our nick. We're going to fold it this way, long ways. So we're folding it long ways. We're going to do our nick right there. Okay, so that's done. And then we're going to grab our tape and slap our tape across the top of this portion. Now, since you're prepping this, I'm going to push this out of the way. This is how I would do it. The tape goes here. It does not go on the wrong side. It goes on the right side of the pocket of the fabric. I don't need scissors to cut the tape. It kind of just tears. It's very thin. It's lightweight. And that piece is ready. And we're going to take this one and we're going to put the tape on this as well because why not? We're going to do this in a minute anyway. So why not keep rolling along with the tape? All right, so that's ready and our pocket is all taped up. So we're going to remove this tape on one side of the pocket. Ooh, doesn't matter which side. It makes no difference. Make sure you press it firmly. That way when you do what I just did, it won't happen when you peel off the backing. And now you're going to place this right matching up the nick you made with the blue, if you so feel that that is the best way to do this, or you can just evenly mark it with, you know, a little overhang on the right and a little overhang on the left of the zip, and you're good to go. So now this is what it should look like. That's it. And so it seems confusing. You're like, wait, that's not right. My brain is not liking this. Well, it is right, because what's going to happen is this is all going to flip up just like so. And this is going to go up here, and then we're going to trim. So hopefully that just made sense. So don't panic. It's right. Trust me. Trust me. And now we're going to take it to the sewing machine. And since I did a number 5 zip, which is wider than a number 3, I'm going to sew this zipper in at 3/8 of an inch, not 1/4 of an inch. So let's go back to the machine and let's sew this all up. So here we are, and we're ready to sew in the zippered pocket. We've taped the first portion, and I've got my ruler because we have to trim this. We are going to, I can leave this zipper foot on, or this foot on. I can leave it on or take it off. It doesn't matter. But because I'm a little weird that way, I really do want my regular foot on that I absolutely love. It is my favorite foot, this one right here. I'm going to shorten my stitch length. This is my narrow hinged foot. I'm going to sew this zipper in at 3/8 of an inch. Again, I know where that's at. So I'm going to take a couple stitches forward. I really don't want this coming out while I stitch, so I'm just going to back stitch a little bit. Now, as I approach this zipper right here, I'm going to pull it out of the way. But before I do that, I want to make sure that my needle is down. There we go. Doo-doo. Okay, so now I'm going to just zip across. And I'm going to cut it like that. So now if you take a look, we're just going to finger press this down. Then we're going to flip it. And we're going to finger press this down, like so. Now I like to stitch this now. So if this was a makeup pouch, I would not include the lining, but it's not. And so we're just going to stitch this down, starting right here. And we're going to use the edge of the foot, which creates 1/8 of an inch. That's what we want. Nice and even. Lengthen my stitch length. I like to try and keep a consistent stitch length for top stitching. So if I had it at 3.5, I always want to do 3.5 for everything. If I did it at 4, I'd keep it at 4. I'm at about 3.75. All right, so that looks pretty. We're going to leave that just like this. Now this is the outside portion. So remember, that's the center. And when we peel this off, we will see, gently, we will see the center right there. So there's my nick. I'm going to line it up. And I'm just going to attach it like so. Again, on this side. But I'm going to move that zipper because I can see where it gets a little wavy right there. I'm going to pull the zipper out of the way. Not all the way over, just a little out of the way. And again, like I said, if you're panicky that you might pull that head off, just tack across here, go stitch back and forth. That's it. So now this side is on. I'm going to flip it over. We're going to peel off this tape. Now in the pattern, it does tell you to interface this pocket. I just starched it. I didn't interface it. There's my center. I can see my blue mark here. Gonna slap that on right there. And go right across. And you do want to make sure you're even, so check your edge a little bit. If it's too far over, then you're going to have a wonky pocket, and you don't want that. You don't want a wonky pocket. I'm going to just squeeze it like so. All right, now I'm going to stitch across again, 3/8 of an inch, same thing that we did before. Reduce my stitch length because I failed to do so. Continue 3/8, coming up to that zip head. Needle down, pull it past it, not off it. It's no fun when it comes off. In this situation, you could easily get it back on, but if it was all sewn together, or at least at the one end, it would be a little bit of a struggle. We could do it. We can do anything. We can do anything. All right, we're going to trim that. I'm going to trim this. Throw those little bits away and lengthen my stitch. Now I don't have to worry about the bottom. It's in. It's no big deal. I just have to flip this part up, and I'm going to stitch that that edge. I'm going to top stitch that at 1/8 of an inch. And I've lengthened my stitch length. I do like to pull these things taut. I don't like to catch extra seam, like extra fabric underneath there and make like a pocket. I don't like that. I just don't. All right. So now what we need to do is trim this. Now we can trim it and then sew over it, or we can sew over it and then trim it. So I think what we're going to do is just like this, and I'm going to grab my rotary cutter, which is over here. And I stand up for these things. I need to look straight down on this. This is just how I am. So I'm going to use my ruler, line it up from this side to the top. This is a very, very straight edge. So if we use this as our straight edge, we're good. And yes, we're going to shave off a tiny bit on that upper portion. You can go as long as it's not a metal zipper, you can just go right over it. So I went over that side. I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to move this zip head out of the way, not off, just out of the way. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I need to do that, use this side, and I said this before, this is the straight, this is perfectly straight, this bottom portion. So yes, we're taking a little bit off the top. This pattern was designed this way so that you didn't have to worry about being exact with this upper portion in case you sewed it a little bit different or a little bit off. So the bottom piece was perfectly shaped, and this upper portion was a touch bigger, about 1/8 of an inch. So we knew we were going to shave that off. And so I'm going to slide this zip back to the middle. And now what I'm going to do, I don't need to top stitch here or edge stitch here. I'm going to stitch across this zipper down this way, and that's going to hold my pocket in place. And you can leave it at a long stitch or a short stitch. It makes no difference. You're basting it. That's what we're doing. And I can feel where it ends, and I don't have to go any further. So I'm just going to stop it there, and I am just going to trim it this way. Same thing here. I don't want to go back this way because I don't want to catch this on something. So I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to do this because you guys know I don't like all these extra little threads. And then I'm going to stitch it from here down. And I'm using the edge of my foot, which is 1/8 of an inch. Just holding it in place. Trim. I'm going to grab this one and this one. Again, a little trim. All right. And now our front portion is open or ready, and if we wanted to open this zipper all the way, we could. If you're still afraid, this is what I would do. This is just me. Couple stitches forward, couple stitches back, and now I know I'm not gonna pull that zip head off. And so if you wanted to take a peek inside, because I kind of do, you've got a really pretty pocket, absolutely beautiful. And so this is ready to go. What we're gonna do is grab our wings, and we're gonna put our tape on our wings and attach our wings to the front of this now. Okay, so I've grabbed our 2 wings. I've made my marks on both on the top edge here of this pattern, or of this pattern piece, at 3/8 of an inch in, because that's where I'm gonna sew it. Just like I did in the last one. We're going to peel this off, and I marked the back here as well. We want to line up this edge. I want to shimmy it up so those 2 purple dots kind of overlap, because that's where we're going to start. And then we are just going to place it on all the way to the bottom. Now if you want, you can do the other side as well. Since we're at it, I'm going to peel it off, throw it away. Line it up. So I'm going to be straight here, shimmy it up, and just cover those 2 purple spots. All right. And if we have to trim, we have to trim. Totally fine. It's not a big deal if you ever have to trim anything. So what? Doesn't matter whose pattern it is. You should always try to square it up. Don't just go from sewing this and then attaching it to the back, and you're like, wait, the top isn't even. You should always check and see if you need to trim things up. It helps. So now I am starting exactly where that's at. My needle is kind of where that groove is. And I'm going to reduce my stitch length to 3. I'm going to take a couple stitches. I'm going to back stitch and then continue right on down. Now I'm going to go over the zipper. No big deal. The machine doesn't mind. Back stitch at the bottom. I'm going to pull it off, trim it, trim my top. Flip this around. I'm going to do the same thing here. Doesn't matter if you start at the top or the bottom. And I'm at that fun little kind of V there, that where they cross paths, sewing at 3/8 of an inch all the way up. Now if I was sewing this in a production bag style, I would just continue. This one would be done, right? I'd line everything up, I'd stack them all, I'd do them all together, and then I would grab the next one and just keep going. I'm going to back stitch, and I would still back stitch, but I would chain it a little bit so I had a little gap there, and then continue to the next one. It saves on thread, it saves on time, it saves on trimming, or on trimming things up. So just one of those things I like to do. Now I'm going to grab my rotary cutter again, and I am going to do the same trim I did before. I am angling it but I'm not catching the stitches. I don't want to catch those stitches. And it really doesn't matter how much you trim off. You just need to make sure you trim enough at the top. If you trim too much, totally fine. It's really can't really trim too much. And you can see I kind of do an angle. All right, I'm going to throw those out. Grab my tape. I'm going to slap it on down here. This time I'm going to do it on this side. It doesn't matter. Either side. I guess you use less tape on this one. All the way down. You can also use the quilting tape that they sell at Joann. If the deal with that is if it's exposed to the air, it will start to be less sticky. A neat little trick I found, if you place it on or pull off as much as you need, because this is it. So if I pull this off, all I need, now it's a little stickier here, it is not sticky over here. To revive that, you take it, I would cut it, take it over to my iron and just steam it a little bit, and that reactivates that sticky part, and then I come over and put it right on, and I am golden, it's ready to use. And your machine hates that, if you're on a domestic, it hates that a whole lot less than my permanent tape. My Tandy tape, it's meant for leather, and so you typically sew leather on a domestic machine. So I can hear this one kind of popping off, which is why I use the permanent. So I am just gonna switch. I'm gonna fold that down again, but I'm gonna grab this, switch my foot. This is my quick change that I have on this machine. It is stiff at first. I mean, it's a spring, and it's got to be tight because it needs to hold. It needs to hold the foot on. So it is a little tight to use, but I love it. My friend Marilyn gave it to me, and I can't thank her enough. It was such a sweet gift. So I extended my stitch length again. You don't back stitch when you top stitch. There's no reason to. And it is thicker over the zipper, but it's not horribly thick, and you can manage it. All right. And I'm going to peel this one off and do the same thing on this side. After this, we're going to prepare our lining pieces. And in our lining piece, we're going to be putting a pocket in. Now, Nimrata shows in her video, or excuse me, in her pattern, how to do a pocket where you end up seeing the zipper tape. I don't do pockets like that anymore. I don't know if it's a quicker method. It might very well be, but I do a method where you don't see the zipper tape. So even if you're a new sewist, this is new to you, you can totally do this. I will show you how, step by step. It's not hard at all, and I think you'll like the results. And I use a zipper template that allows me to create a nice little pocket facing where it's a window. It's a nice little window. You're gonna like it. I think you're gonna dig it. So if you decide that that's too scary, you can always follow the directions in the pattern. So you'll have two options. All right, so this is done. Look at how pretty that is. And yes, right now it's kind of flimsy. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine. It's not a big deal. It's going to be just fine. Why? Because I'm going to show you, I'm going to fuse my Thermolam onto the back, and then I'm also going to fuse my, I believe it's the 809 on top of that. And we're going to do that after we prepare our lining. So let's grab our stuff for our lining and get that going. We're all set to put our zipper into our lining, our zipper pocket into our lining. I've got the zip, I've got my pocket prepped. I put tape on either of the short ends. That's how we're going to keep a nice straight zipper. And I'm putting this pocket in using my templates. I don't like zipper tape showing. It's just one of my things. So this is how I do my zippers. My zipper pockets. So I have my template. You can pick this up on my website, amylyndesigns.com. I have my lining pocket here, And I have my repositionable tacky spray by Aileen. It's spectacular. It's all I use now. I used to use Dritz and I don't like it anymore. So this is what I'm using. So what you want to do is you want to cut these out, cut out this center section. I spray either the back of the template or the wrong side of the fabric, which is interfaced. And I usually try to match it to whatever I'm attaching it to so that it's less noticeable. And so I use that on the back of this. And then what I'll do is I take this and I'm going to spray it on this. And I do that in a garbage can, typically away from my machine. I do not want it to get into my machine, or a garbage can or a box, anything, it doesn't matter. So now this is tacky and it's ready to be placed onto this. Prior to that, what we're gonna do is get this zipper pocket, the pocket itself prepped and ready. So we want to peel off our tape and we're gonna put our zipper on like so. Lining up the edge, and then we're going to stitch it. We're going to baste it in place at 1/8 of an inch. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be. You just don't stitch it at 1/4, otherwise you'll see that stitching. So you want to do as close to the edge as possible. And now I'm going to peel off this side and do the exact same thing. Now what you want when you're doing this is the wrong side of the zipper tape on the right side of the fabric. So now I fold it up like this. And yeah, the zipper is a touch shorter than the fabric, the lining, because you're gonna use the pocket, the directions that she has for the pocket size. And then you can even cut the zip the same as the pocket. You're just going to use the template. And I do have another video specifically on doing these pockets. All right, so that's on. There we go. My sides are even. I am going to trim off these little bits here. Pull that one out. I know you guys keep seeing me throwing it to the left, but I swear there's a garbage can there. It's not just going into the abyss. If it was, my son would come down and vacuum it if I asked nicely. He's a pretty good kid about that. All right, so basting this side in. He drives me bonkers, but he's a pretty good kid. All right, so this side's in. Trimming, setting to the side. Now we've sprayed the back of this. We're going to use a ruler. I'm going to drop this template 1 1/4 inches down, and I'm going to locate the center. I put a nick here, right here. You can see that nick. And I use my ruler, and I'm just going to use 7. It's just a nice number, and there it is. So that's 1 1/4 mark at the 7. And then this is the reason that there's a line on these templates, so you can always locate the center. So you just butt this up to the bottom of the ruler, and then you know that your zipper hole is going to be perfect. So now I'm going to reduce my stitch length to 3. I'm going to start in one corner. I have a tendency to always start in the upper left corner, and I'm just going to stitch it straight down. Now the beauty of these templates is that they're cardstock. And if you sew over it, no big deal. You don't have to draw anything on. There's no transferring like drawing with an acrylic template. I'm not a fan of those. And then you can, God forbid you hit the acrylic template with your rotary cutter, because you're going to nick that blade. And we know those blades aren't super cheap. And I'm going to stitch it straight down this side. And hope I land, I land right in the corner. Always makes me a happy girl. I'm gonna trim that, pull that away. I'm gonna go up the side here. I'm using my narrow hinged foot. And I'm gonna pivot and go back across where I started. and back stitch and forward again, and I'm done. Trim, trim, and trim. All right. Now you can peel this off, or I can leave it on. I don't want to. I'd rather not. Now I don't go and buy extra interfacing for this stuff. I just save my scraps. And this is a piece of Scor Tape that I had from other stuff I make. And so I just fuse it to the back of the extra piece of fabric I had from the lining. And that was it. So now I've cut this and stopped short about 1/2 inch of the end. And I'm going to use my little nippy scissors. I got little, and nip it. I'm nipping it. See, they're real pointy. And they get me right into that corner. Some people don't stitch the corners or up the short side. That's fine. You don't have to. I do. If you were not going to, I would still use the template, and I would start here, stitch across to here, back stitch. When I started here, I would back stitch, forward stitch, back stitch, all the way across, stop at the corner, back stitch, go back to the corner, call it a day. And then when I trimmed it, and the same thing goes for the bottom line, and then when I trimmed it, I would just make sure I trim it nice into those, at that stopping point where the thread is at, where my stitch is at. Now I don't want to catch those stitches, so I'm very careful to just nip into the corner and not catch it. Now if I do, which I have, not a big deal, I'll just go back and restitch. So now what I'm going to do is finger press this. I'm going to pull it this way. I'm going to pull it this way. I would not recommend taking it to the iron because then you're going to shrink things, and that's just, we don't want to do that. So I'm going to flip to the back side. I'm going to grab my, I believe this is my 10mm tape. My other tape is my 3mm tape, and I like that tape for a lot of things, but on the back of these, I really like my 10mm. I think that's a better choice for this purpose. All right, so that's ready. And now I am going to do another finger press like that and let that flip. Same here. And now I'm going to roll it to the back. Okay. Now I'm going to peel this off right here. I'm going to peel this. Now I've used my permanent tape because I don't want this moving. So I can feel that edge with my fingers. I can't, it's hard to show. It's one of those things that you'll feel as you sew it, or excuse me, as you fold it. So I'm getting a really nice straight crease here. That's all I want. And as I fold this back, I want to make sure that my facing, my lining here, this template, this zipper facing piece, this template piece here, I want to make sure that is to the back so that there's kind of a lip and an edge formed by the actual lining piece. That way you don't see my template piece here, this right here. You're just creating a nice little window. It's my window pane. Peel that off, flip this back, and you can probably see now that seam right there. And I'm a little retentive about it, I'm not gonna lie, I am. I do my best to get a nice window. And now you notice I didn't put tape all the way past because I'm gonna grab this when I stitch the pocket and close it. So there's my window. Now if you don't like the way these look, which I'm not thrilled with it, I'm going to take my little scissors and I'm going to go back in on that one, and I can see where I need to nick it a little bit. It isn't a big deal. I'm going to pull off that tape a little bit. This is not, this is just how it works. You can't, it's not always perfect right out the gate. Boy, wouldn't it be great if it was. If it was perfect right out the gate, I think things might be boring. There we go. All right, so I like the way that looks. That's much better. There we go. So that's even. That's a little bit flatter now. Some days I get it great, and other days it's like, man, I'm not going back to fix it. Not enough. So if you wanted to take this over to the iron and give it a little press right there, you could. Or what I'm going to do, I'm going to call it good enough. So now we have prepped this and we've prepped this and we're ready to move on to the next step. So we are going to flip this over and add tape to the back of this, and then we're going to center that in just a minute. Okay, so we're ready to place our pocket inside of our template window that we've created on our lining. This is the side that's going to be closed, so it's going to be on the left. I'm going to place it underneath here. I've already tore off the tape backing, and I'm going to line it up underneath because I have the template edge right here. I want it with the edge of the zip over here, and then I know the right side is going to be just fine. So what I like to normally do, I like to get this side situated so the zipper teeth is centered, and then I'll go to this side, the right side, and do the same thing and try to keep things from getting keep things from getting wavy. And once I do that, I'm going to take a peek, and I feel like this is good. I like this. I like this very much. I'm going to pull those teeth out, pull the head out of the way. And so that's ready for me to stitch that in. And I'm going to stitch the box on this at 1/8 of an inch, and I'll use the edge of my foot and the edge of the window here. And what I need to do is mark on either end, and I can do it with a pen. This is a water-soluble pen that I use, or I can use pins. I'm going to use pins for this one, and I have my little ruler here. So I'm going to mark from the short edge out 1/8 of an inch, and I'm just going to slip a pin in. It's going to be right about there, and same goes on this end. So it's about there. Now, what I'm going to do for this window, I'm going to start at this edge where this pin is at, 1/8 of an inch on this side, 1/8 of an inch on this window, and then 1/8 of an inch from this side. So it's going to be this corner right about there. And I'm going to take a couple stitches, I'm going to back stitch, I'm going to go all the way across, I'm going to stop when I get to this pin, I'm going to back stitch again, and then come back to that pin, and then I'm going to pivot. Then I'm done. On either end, you're going to need you're going to leave tails, and I'll show you what to do with those as well. But to do this, you have to make sure that when you go to stitch this, that your pocket is up. Otherwise, you're going to stitch it closed. So we're going to head over to the machine, and we're going to stitch this all up, and we're going to get this zippered pocket real nice, and you're going to like it a whole bunch. Okay, we're all set to stitch this. I've used my pin as my guide, and I'm going to pull that out because I really don't want to hit it. I'm going to poke it back here, and we are ready to stitch. Now I'm going to take 2 stitches forward and then go back because I want to catch that. And I am going to go slow, and I'm going to reverse it. Now the goal here is to get it right back into those original holes. If you feel you can't, I will show you a technique when we get to the other end. It's super fun. And when I first started sewing like this, it's how I always made sure I ended up back into the hole. And I don't want to make new holes because it just looks sloppy. All right, so I'm coming to the end. I'm going to hand crank it because I don't want to go past. Now, I think I'm at the right spot with that pin, so I'm going to pull it out, and just to double check, I am perfect. It's probably a touch more than 1/8 of an inch, and definitely not 1/4 of an inch. So now I want to go back into that those spots, and like I said, if you're not 100% confident on your backstitching capabilities, so this is the direction we were originally traveling. Spin it around, and now you don't have to worry about going backwards. You are once again going forwards. Spin it back around, and we're gonna go forward again. You can't tell me that that's not nifty. All right, so now that's done. We're gonna pull that off. Yep, we're done. Not completely, just with this. Now I'm gonna cut it a little bit longer, and I'll show you why in just a second. So you could trim it here, but it would start to unravel, and you have a long tail here as well. So you can go to the back and pull on these gently. So you can go to the back and pull on these tails gently. So you have a tail here and a tail here. We left them about 2 inches long. We're going to flip it to the back, and we're going to pull on this gently and pull that back to the back, and now you can tie it in a knot. You don't have to tie it in a knot. You can actually just trim it and call it a day if you want. But I am going to use this and tie it in a knot. Now, after we get this all set, we are going to, I'm going to fuse my thermolam to my 2 outer portions, because then this is all we have to do for the lining. And again, I'm just giving this a tug, and it pulls that front thread right to the back, and there it is. And now we're just going to tie this in a knot. So what I was saying was I am going to fuse my thermolam and my 809. So I cut my thermolam with the pattern piece that says if I don't feel that my machine can handle all that thickness, I want it to be smaller than my other pieces. Even though my machine can handle it, I don't want it to. I don't like all that bulk in the seam. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I cut my 809 the same size as my exterior pieces, and then I'm going to fuse that on top of that thermolam. All right, so now this is done, and what we're going to do, because we're going to go up the sides and over the top, we're going to flip this down. Trust me. So now we're going to go back to the last spot that we stitched, this hole right here. Now I don't want this. Now I always keep hemostats. I don't want this pulling out, because then I have to rethread it. I don't want to rethread it. I really don't. There we go. So now I'm going to take, again, we're going to take 2 stitches forward. And yes, we're going right into there. I'm going to keep that down. I'm going to spin it back around. And I'm going to turn it around because I want to get it back in these exact same spots. And here we go. And now we need to make sure that we only go 1/8 of an inch. It's okay if we go a little shorter, but we don't want to go any longer. So now I'm going to take a look, because that feels like 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to spin it, and it's not. It isn't. So I'm going to need to take a short, just a fraction, not quite a full stitch, and I've adjusted it by lifting my foot and kind of wiggling it there. Now I'm at about 1/8, and that's great. So before I pivot, I want to make sure that my needle's on the upswing, so that I know that the hook in the bobbin grabbed the, that it's all grabbing, so that the upper thread is grabbing the bobbin thread, and that has to do with the hook. If you pivot with the needle straight down, you're not going to grab that. So now I am ready to sew this way. And while you're doing that, if you're afraid that you're going to hit this, just move it. Now when we get to this end, again, we want, just eyeball it. There it is, so we know where we have to stop, because we want to be exact. I'm currently working with my head straight down, and now I can see it. Now my needle is on its way back up. I'm going to pivot, and I'm eyeballing my needle center, my foot center is right centered with that stitch right there. And I am going to hand crank. Why? Because I don't want to surpass that and go right over that hole. And look at that. I can actually manipulate that needle to end up right in that hole. And I'm going to swing back around and go right back in these. And that's it. And you can do the same thing if you want, where you can cut this and pull it to the back side. So that's it. Our pocket is made. We can open it up and take a peek. Looks pretty great. I'm kind of digging it. So what we need to do, this last portion to finish off our pocket, this is what we need to do. I'm going to reduce my stitch length, take a couple stitches forward, backwards, go right over that zip. Done. Same thing over here. That's why we didn't tape this. Because if I had taped that, you would not be able to fold this back to catch it. You'd be fighting with the tape, and you don't want to fight with the tape. All right, so now I'm going to trim everything, and we're going to come back, and we are going to put our zipper in, and we're going to use the butler method. You're going to love it. Absolutely love it. All right, I'll see you back here in just a minute. So I'm going to teach you how to do the butler method, and you can do it with just about any bag that requires a zipper placement at the top with the end either being sewn into the end or there's a zipper tab. In this instance, we have a zipper tab. So I've created my tab using the 2x2. All you do is fold it like a double fold bias, that's it. Now what I normally do is I will fold it in half. I fold it in half and I iron it, and then I fold one side. And then, so that I always get the back side that's going to be just a bit bigger, I wrap it around and then iron it again. So that's how I do it, and I don't interface this because, again, if we're sewing on a domestic, you really have to get in there, and it's a lot to sew through. And I don't want to see you struggle. Now you can use Elmer's glue on this if you want to. I use tape. It's just what I have. And I'm not patient with the Elmer's glue. I also find that sometimes the Elmer's glue, if I iron it too much, it stops being sticky. So I don't like that. Yeah, I really don't. So right now we're just going to use this tape. And because I don't want to monkey with this, I really don't want to fight the tab. Now you can do a cork tab too if you want, but we're doing it like this. I don't do all my tabs like this. I do them a different way as well, but we're doing it like the pattern has it. And I'm going to slap another piece of tape here. And remember, this is the repositionable, so it's not as sticky as the permanent, and so you shouldn't have a whole lot of trouble with it. And again, if your needle's getting sticky, grab cotton ball, alcohol, wipe it off. And I'm going to peel this off. And so I've peeled this off, and now what I'm going to do is wrap this around the end of the zipper. If you're wondering, what's the end, it's where the flat end of the zip is, not the pointy end. So you're just going to place this, and yes, this is cut larger than the zip, which makes it even easier so that you don't have to worry about if your stitches don't start nicely. It's nice when it overlaps it, and because then you can start your stitches a little further back, and they're going to catch. So I'm going to sew real close to the edge, longer stitch length. And as I'm coming up to this, some machines get angry and they don't like trying to go over those zipper teeth. So what you want to do is grab a hump jumper, put it on the back side. You're keeping the front and the back level, and you get a better grip on it, and you don't get any skip stitches. Now as you come down, your front, as long as it's making contact, you're good. If it's not, and your back end is still too high, and you can see it's just really, really amped up, you can take this and slip it in the front only on the edge and continue to sew across. So we're going to put this right back here like it was because it's pointing it down. And it just comes right off that hill. Beautiful. So our zip is now ready. And I'm going to trim it. Little rotary cutter action. And so the Butler method that I'm going to teach you today in this, the placement of this zipper, we're doing it on this sunshine here. And like I said, you can do it on almost any of them, any pattern you would like. I did not put tape at the ends here. You can, but I didn't. I cut it off a little sooner. So here's how I determine the ends, and because it gets confusing, how you want to put your tape on. So face them to each other so they're mirror imaged. Your tape on the left-hand side, because this is the Butler method. This is it. You don't want tape at 3/4 of an inch from this end. You can have it at this end. I just did it because I was cutting tape and this is the length that I had in the back. So, so nobody gets confused, because it is kind of nice because this side ends up holding the, the lining piece in place. We're going to set this one to the side, but we're going to use this one first. So I'm going to peel this off. I'm going to take my zipper. Now my zipper is cut every single time so that it is 3/4 of an inch shorter than this length across. You can even go so far as to do it a skosh shorter than even 3/4 of an inch. You don't want to go, you could a little bit shorter, just a little bit. So this, it just depends on how tight you put this and what your seam allowance is going to be here. So I'm doing 3/4 of an inch because the only thing I'm changing on this pattern is that I am going to make it so that my seam allowance here on this side and this side are going to be at 1/4 of an inch. That's the only thing I'm changing. Otherwise, you can do everything the same, because you have to take into consideration that this back end, you have to have a gap here of 1/2 inch from here to whatever the seam allowance is. So if the seam allowance is, I'm using 1/4 of an inch and I need that 1/2 inch, that's why I cut it at 3/4. That's why I cut this shy of 3/4 of the length of that. That's the only reason. That's it. So we're going to do this, and then I'm going to grab the piece. This is my front lining piece, and as you can see on this side there is no tape over here, and on this one it's the opposite end because they have to go on top of one another. So I'm going to place this and I'm going to line up. I want this to be lined up on this end, just like that. It's real nice. It's real pretty. And because this is a larger zipper, it's a number 5, I didn't need to move that head out of the way. All right, so now if I want, say I want this lining to stick nicely at this end, you can, you don't have to. You can throw another piece, you can throw that tape down. Like I said, the tape in the back I had was already pre-measured, only because I had already torn it off from something else. So there's that. And now you can see everything fits. And if I didn't show you earlier, this is what I do on my sunshines. It's fusible fleece. It's the thermolam. It's not actually, it is fleece. It's the thermolam underneath there, and I cut it smaller using her pattern, and then I cut a piece of 809, the same size as the whole piece itself. So now what I'm going to do, I am going to start from the end that doesn't have the closed zipper. So I'm going to open this so you can see. This is the side that's going to be the closed end, right? So this is going to be the closed end. And what we want to do is finish at that end. So we have to start at that end. And what I'm going to do also is I'm going to mark on this back piece 3/4 of an inch. I cannot stick a pin in here. So I'm marking in. I just marked in 3/4 of an inch right there. And now what I have to do, I'm going to sew this zipper in at 3/8, and I'm going to stop when I get to that mark right there. So let's zoom in on that. Because I want you to see exactly what I'm doing. So here we go, sewing this in at 3/8 of an inch. And like I said, shortening your stitch length, and I'm going to stitch it in, back stitch, and continue. Now because I trimmed all of these spots, I'm not having any trouble sewing at them. Now I'm going to pull this zip out of the way. And here it goes. It's going out of the way. There we go. It's out of the way. And I am going to continue to sew until I get to that purple spot, that little spot I made with my pen. And now I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to grab my hemostats. Now the zipper is going to be split apart, and I need to pull it into the lining here. So it's between the outer portion, the exterior piece, and the lining piece. And I'm just going to stitch right past it. And what I'm going to do one more time is go right over that again. And I like to do that just because I want to catch it. Now, I want to make sure that I did this at 1/4. So I'm just going to go back and do another double check right here. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, that looks so good. There we go. And so now what I need to do, I'll need to flip this over and top stitch on the other side. And now you don't have to worry about this zipper coming off. It won't, because you've put it in on this. It's in right here. So since it's in right here, this zipper is not going to come out. So now what I need to do is top stitch right here. So let's back this out so y'all can see that. And I'm going to lengthen my stitch. And you can change your foot if you'd like when you're sewing on this cork, just because you don't want it to get caught. So we need to switch this just like so. And so now what I'm going to do is get this ready to do this top stitching here. So we lengthened our stitch. I rethreaded my needle because it popped out, and I put my Teflon foot on. And I'm going to stitch close to this edge at 1/8 of an inch. Now if I decided I wanted to put in and make this a crossbody, I could have put the D-ring on the front here, and then I would have put one on the back. And it would have been a cute, or I could even put them here and here. It all depends on your preference and where you like your crossbody strap to attach. And now as I'm sewing this, you can see I'm not catching the lining. I don't like to catch the lining. And I'm going to take the seam allowance and I'm stitching it. I'm attaching that. And now I'm coming up to this little hill here. So I'm going to put my hump jumper behind me, behind my foot, move it along. I want nice, pretty stitches. There we go. And that is exactly why if I hadn't trimmed those top edges earlier, we would have struggled with that. Okay, so there's that. That's done. Now, like I said, I don't top stitch the lining. So our front portion is done, and now what we're going to do is put our back piece on. And I always just like to trim some things up. I don't like little things all over the place. So now let's grab our back piece and let's attach that to our zip. So what I'm going to do, as we did before, we're going to peel this off. And this one's a little bit wider, so I'm going to move it just a skosh. Here we go. All right. Excellent. The reason I did that was because I actually used the 10 millimeter tape across it. Yeah, that's what I did. All right, so now I'm going to peel this off. If you have a pin, that helps to get it started. If you don't worry about it. You can do it with your fingernail. Just a pin is sometimes a little bit nicer. And I am going to put this one on right there because I really did like that it held the lining piece in place. So now what I want to do, I am concerned about one thing. I really like it when these things match like this and it looks really cute from front to back. And so I do my best to get that to line up. It doesn't always happen. Same thing with the other sunshine. I try my best. So what I'll do is go like this, and then I'll kind of open it to see, and it looks like it's lining up. I'm going to flip this over because I need to open this zipper. It's just easier when the zip is open because you don't get the wave in the zip, and that's what you don't want, that wave. And don't stretch your zip. It should meet up at that edge almost perfectly. And there we go. All right. Perfect. So now I can fold this back and take a peek. And if I want to zip that closed, I can, just to get a better look. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is add my lining piece to this side, and then I'm going to stitch it in as well, just like I did the front. And then what we have to do, again, we have to start at the end where the tab is at and stitch across to this end. And so this time we'll be stitching with the lining side up. And see, that matched up perfectly, that's what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our pen and our ruler, and we're going to mark again at 3/4 of an inch. Right there. Now, as long as your zipper is even on these ends from the front side to the back side, pulling it through is not going to be an issue. And so you can leave this foot on as well for sewing this in. And so I'm going to start reducing my stitch length, back stitch, and then continue. And the closed zip is over here, the zip head. So I need to stop, needle down, pull that out of the way. Now remember, when we get to our mark, we need to grab our hemostats and we need to pull our zipper. I teach this method in all of my bags, and I just really like it. So now I'm going to pull this out of the way, and I am just going to continue right past that. I'm going to trim it, and I'm going to come back and go over it one more time. And that's that. And now what we want to do, same thing, open it up. And now you can see the lining, I'm keeping it to this side. And now I want to lengthen my top stitch, and I'm going to top stitch this, just like I did the front. And I might need my hump jumper, might not. I might not, I don't know. Let's just see. Because sometimes it'll get hung up before it hits that hill. And you might get an extra couple of stitches, or it might jog you to the left or the right. It's a little nicer when it's closed just to stitch, so that way you can get a nice 1/8 of an inch line here, because you're using the edge of the foot to top stitch this. And again, we want the seam allowance that we just created underneath what we're stitching. Not the lining, just the seam allowance. Now I'm coming up to this hill and I can feel it. And so I'm going to throw this underneath and continue. And it popped it out sooner than I wanted it to, so I'm going to throw it back underneath there. And yeah, it shoots it. right across. Now I don't trim the zipper here. I never trim that zipper. I leave it. If you trim it, it might fray and it might pull out if someone overpacks this thing, which has been known to happen to some of my bags. People overpack them. And so now you can see that they both match up nicely. I think it looks kind of pretty, actually. So see how that looks? I think it looks pretty good. Our little seams here match up. I kind of like the way that has turned out. So the next step that we're going to do is throw some tape down in a couple places so we can make sure that we have a nice seam and things match up appropriately, because I always worry about this because it's a little bit higher than the lining. So I'm going to come back and show you guys how to put that tape on. Okay, so I've thrown some tape on here on these corners, and you don't have to use tape. You can use clips. These are the clips. Always fun, fun, fun. You can see I throw other things in my little clip bucket. So you can use these clips as well. But I like to use tape because, well, I like tape. And I don't like clips very much. I do on certain things. And you can't use pins on this. So what you're going to want to do here, you peel that off and you just want to line up these two portions right here, just like so. And it's totally okay that this is not adhered right here. Totally okay. You don't have to have all your fusible stuff completely fused. It's really not a big deal. Now there's a little bit of a pocket there. Don't worry, it's going to be fixed. So you're going to go around, and we're going to go all the way around, and you're going to pin everything. I should say clip everything or tape everything, and you're also going to, the lining we're going to pin. Now I know in the pattern it says that we turn through the pocket. I don't like doing that because I sweat. So I'm not even kidding. It is a fight. It's a struggle for me. It's one I don't enjoy. And so I like to just turn it at the lining because no one ever sticks their head in my pocket to look at the lining hole. Now, if you want to do it through the pocket, follow the instructions and do it just like she has it. She has the pocket as two separate pieces, and totally you can do my method, same exact method, and do two separate pieces, no big deal. So go ahead and go around, and we're just going to pin this and clip this, and we're going to come back and sew that all together. So I've gone ahead and I've pinned everything, and I'm just going to start any old random place. It really doesn't matter. And I'm going to sew this at 1/4 inch. I believe the directions have you at 3/8. I'm doing 1/4. As long as you're consistent with that seam allowance, it's going to be just fine. So I'm going to start stitching here. Actually, yeah, now I'll start, you know where I'm going to start? I'm going to start right along the bottom here. So I'm going to start along the bottom. I've switched over to my narrow foot. I'm going to take a couple stitches, and I'm going to continue to stitch forward. And I'm going to stitch all the way around, and then I'm going to show you how we pinch all the corners once we've stitched the entire width, the circumference of the bag. I wanted to show you this one particular spot that occurs in this pattern. I know it's one, but it's actually two particular spots. It happens on this side and on this side. You can't see my other hand. It's the opposite side of this. As you're approaching, because I just go a complete circle, you can do this one of two ways. You can sew it from the high side, which would be the cork side, to the vinyl or to the lining side. And then you don't have to worry so much about the height of this, because this is really high by comparison. I mean, I have to use the high side of my hump jumper. So you have to have something that can lift up the back of your foot as you approach this seam. So you want to get as close as you can, and that's it. And so I'm going to put this underneath it to continue sewing. And I really don't want it to go shooting off. So I'm going to take another stitch. Actually, I'm going to hand crank it. And now my needle is just exactly, it's on the other side of the cliff. We're gonna call this a cliff. So now I'm gonna approach that cliff and I have to pivot. And again, I'm just gonna lift up the back of my foot and I am going to continue sewing this way. Now without that, you would struggle here trying to get up that little cliff. So what you can use if you don't have a hump jumper, which there's $6 on Amazon, you can use this if you wanted to. So if you had that, I think that's a $4 little square that I use for so many things. So I'm just gonna finish stitching this. And then I'm gonna show you what I do next to pinch the corners. So we are going to go around now and pinch all 4 corners and sew them together. Now when you do this at these thicker seams, when you pinch it, I'm going to do this just like this, make sure these seams meet, you can see that they're meeting, and push them in opposite directions. It makes it easier for your machine to sew over this. Now you can't pin this, but you can use clips on it. And this is where I would use these clips, or I would throw some tape on it. So you can flip it this way or flip it this way, whatever is easiest. Don't worry about smushing it because you're gonna have to smush it to turn it right side out. So now I'm gonna sew this at 1/4 of an inch. Like I've done everything. Now the pattern doesn't have you doing 1/4 of an inch. I'm doing 1/4 of an inch. I wanted my seams all, now see I didn't like the way that looked, so I'm gonna come back right back here. I sew everything at 1/4 of an inch, but since I did my zipper for 1/4 of an inch, that's why I'm keeping consistent with the 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm gonna sew this, and I'm gonna take a couple of stitches forward and then back. There's gonna be a little bit of pressure on that corner, so you just want to make sure on these bottoms that they're really stitched well. So you're gonna do that and then do it one more time. And you are gonna pinch all 4 corners identically. And then you're just gonna trim up all of the threads. So why don't you go ahead and do all 4 corners, then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna show you how we turn this right side out. This is how I did this just before I move on to the rest. I stitched across the bottom here. I stitched in about 2.5 inches. You can see 2.5 inches. I, again, eyeballed it. That's why there's thread up, or a ruler up here. When you get that 2.5 inches, stop, backstitch, continue all the way across, and again, stop on the other side. Again, 2.5 inches shy of the other side. Go past it a little bit, backstitch, and then continue to the ends. And so when you're doing these corners and you're sewing all the way around, when you get to these corners, whether you end it or start it, you need to backstitch. If you don't backstitch, it's going to tear out when you go to fold it, or when you go to make your boxed corner, your flat bottom there. So that's how you do that. So now let's go ahead. You can go ahead and go all the way around and do all 4 of these corners, and then we're going to come right back and we're going to turn this right side out. Okay, so we're ready to birth this bag. I went ahead and I used my seam ripper and I ripped out the stitches that run between these 2 spots where I backstitched. Some of you might be wondering why I choose to stitch there. That's because by stitching there, I've created a perforation and my fabric folds a little bit easier for me when it's time for me to fold this up and tuck it inside and stitch it closed. So what I've done now is I've brought my iron over and she's ready. Yep, my trusty old Sunbeam. And to make birthing a bag that has vinyl or cork a little bit easier, I like to steam the vinyl or cork. I find that makes for the easiest birthing out there. Wouldn't it be great if real birthing could be that easy? Just steamer, the baby will come out easier. I know, it's a ridiculous thought. Anyway, so, but kind of funny. I'm gonna do this, go all the way around, and I can feel inside I'm just very careful not to burn myself. And now what I'm gonna do is poke this in. I wanna get this nice and poked in. So you can see I kind of form a little bowl. Now I'm gonna do the same thing over here. And the reason I do that is because I want it to be a crisp bottom. I want it to be a nice pointed bottom where those corners are. And now I am just going to start to roll this in, because you have, now imagine doing this through the pocket. You still have to do it. It's just, I think doing it this way is just a touch easier. The whole thing goes just into itself. So now I've gotten it inside like this, and what I'm going to do is twist it a bit, gently, just pry it out of its shell. That's kind of how I see this. Now I apologize if the video is a little shaky there, but I'm working in some tight confined corners here. All right, so there we go. So she's out, and she's out. It's a girl. I know it's not. So now I'm gonna stick my hand back in and get those bottoms, get that corner, and I'm gonna pop this right here. Just gonna roll it. Now if it's hard, you're like, oh, I can't do it, I can't do it. You can steam it from this side. Don't touch it. If you touch it, it's not gonna do a whole lot, but I still wouldn't touch it. You can, however, throw a pressing cloth on there and do it. I've done that before. No big deal. And I'm not a lefty, so that was a little struggle there. No joke. I'm a righty. And there's my, there we go. See how pretty that is? So that's that open end. I'm gonna tuck everything in real nice. And then, if I wanted to, which I don't know if I do, I could take this to the machine and give it a little press. I really don't feel as though it's that necessary. And if for some reason you get a wrinkle, no matter what you're using, go ahead and take a pressing cloth and dampen it. Turn this down to wool setting. You don't want it on linen and you don't want it on cotton because it will wrinkle that interfacing. So put it on a wool setting and then go ahead and press it with that pressing cloth. So that's that, and I will close up the hole, which I don't think it's necessary to do that video portion of the hole. But that right there is your finished pouch. She is all done. We've just birthed her, and that was easy. And so I don't have to struggle with the tiny pocket. My inside is nice and smooth, and I would just simply pull this out. And because we have that perforation there, just gonna pull it out like that. And you can see where the perforation, like it's starting to create that fold. And I'm just gonna start here, go across. I'm gonna start here, go across, back stitch, and stitch all the way across and back stitch, and that's it. And that's the hole, and the hole is completely done, and you're just gonna tuck it back in. And if you're wondering what this lining fabric is that I've used, it is by Robert Kaufman, and it's the Essex linen. And so that's the pouch. It's nice, it's big, it's a touch bigger than it would be if you sewed at 3/8 of an inch, but I mean really, it's 1/4 of an inch bigger. It's not huge. It's not that much bigger, but it is a nice size bag. There's your pocket that turned out so super duper. And then our inside pocket, which turned out pretty terrific as well. And personally, what I'm gonna do with mine is use it as a makeup bag. That's my intention. So, and you can see when I pinned all of this together, I made sure that these two wings at the bottom connected as well. So I think it turned out super. I really like it. I hope you enjoy making this bag. And I think it would be super if you put it on Instagram. If you give a shout out to Bagstock, that would be fantastic. Feel free to tag me. Just because I did the tutorial, then I know you saw it. You don't have to. It's not my pattern. But by all means, post these. Go over to the Bagstock group and post these. I'll put a link on the comment section here. And again, I hope you guys had a great time. I really enjoyed making this with you. I hope you move on to the Bagstock website, grab the other patterns that are there, grab some of the purchase patterns. She's got a couple that are freebies over there. Grab those up too. And hopefully I'll see you again here on my channel. If you enjoyed this, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.